82% of team members feel misunderstood or undervalued. So this is exactly where I like to be, teaching, communicating, helping others, realizing their aspirations. I'm so excited about shattering the glittering image and uncovering the truth about you.
Welcome back to the Intrepid Impact Leadership Show here on YouTube. I'm Jerry Howard, your host, your leadership expert, and your certified jail inspector. Today, we are continuing on our journey of the 5 leadership voices. We're actually going to conclude the teaching part, but I'm very excited to share with you that we're also going to be expanding on our content about the leadership tools. So historically, we've talked about accidental and intentional leaders. We've talked about the 5 circles of influence, of course, the 5 voices quite a bit. And again, we're going to wrap that up today, but it's going to be a great time to continue with this content because both with guests as well as the founders of Giant, we're going to hear some amazing testimony about the uses of this content in the real world. Today, we're continuing with the 5 leadership voices. And we're going to wrap up with what's called the pioneer voice. The pioneer. And pioneer is not unlike what it sounds, but we're going to get into the details about what a pioneer voice is and how they show up in the marketplace. We'll cut this long pause out because I'm trying to think of how to transition. So the big idea here is everyone speaks, but not everyone's heard. I'll say it again. Everyone speaks, but not everyone's heard. There is no way to overstate that because that is the challenge. And I'll give you an example. When I was running the hospitals, and again, remember, I'm a creative voice, so creative is one of the quieter voices. When I was running the hospitals, we had a daily morning meeting that the hospital administrator ran. And even in that environment, I still lacked some level of what we call emotional safety. Emotional safety is just knowing that you can be candid about a thing, honest, direct, and not lose any social capital or lose any positional authority, right? So in that moment, I realized that there are voices at the table that I would offend if I said certain things in certain ways. And of course, we all know we don't want to ostracize somebody in a meeting. We should never do that. But again, we lacked emotional safety. And I think it's primarily because we had different leadership voices at the table. People had different tendencies. And it was important for us to keep those tendencies in mind when we're communicating. So emotional safety is the key because why? Everyone speaks, but not everyone is heard. Everyone speaks, but not everyone's heard. And as we mentioned in the previous episodes, the cause of that, or the results of that, are that teams on average function at a 58, less than 60% of their potential. And we all remember what a 58 was in high school, failing. All right? So by adopting the 5 leadership voices into your organization, you are beginning a journey that will help you win. At Intrepid Impact Leadership, we're all about winning. And you know that we sit at the intersection of faith, leadership, and business, so we know that Jesus is the epitome of winning. But what we do is we take the principles that we found in the New Testament that Jesus delivered to the world, and we use them in the marketplace. All right, so the 5 leadership voices, where can you find that in the New Testament? Well, there's Ephesians 4, there's 1 Corinthians 12, there's Romans 12. We see the giftings there. All through there, we hear Jesus talking about the good and the bad fruit, right? A tree can't bear fruit that is good unless the tree is good. So what we're doing is we're using these biblical principles in a culturally sensitive way to transmit great ideas to the marketplace. I believe that in America, the marketplace is the nation's largest mission field. There is no better place for biblical principles than in the marketplace. If you think about our laws and our civil tort systems, all of this comes out of thou shalt not steal, right? Which is a biblical principle that Jesus actually elevated. Jesus took the 613, I believe, laws of the Hebrew Old Covenant and elevated all of the moral laws into 2. And that is love God, love others as you love yourself. Now, we find him calling those two commandments, the two number one commandments. It summarizes all of them. But I believe that it's a three-part system. So think about that. Love God, part one. Love others, part two. As you love yourself, part three. What are we saying? Are we saying be narcissistic and think about only ourselves? No, we're talking about loving yourself enough to know your tendencies, know your leadership voice, get your vertical alignment right. That's your relationship with your higher power, your spiritual connection, and then your horizontal alignment, right? So we got the vertical alignment and then how you interact with the world. Horizontal, vertical. Now we know what the cross stands for, right? That's how we interact with God, number one, how we interact with others. But you can't do that if you don't know yourself. You've got to know that if you're introverted, you need time to recharge, perhaps in the middle of the day. And I'm not saying take a 2-hour nap at work. No, I'm saying maybe you should spend a few minutes, maybe 30 minutes on your lunch break reading. If you're extroverted, you know that you need to recharge by being around others or being around new ideas and experiences. Know yourself to lead yourself. Knowing your tendencies. This is the foundational piece to everything that we do at the Intrepid Impact Team. You cannot scale your business if you don't have the right people. You can't grow your business if you don't have more people. You have to multiply yourself. Well, I'll tell you what, the business owners, the executives, the leaders that multiply bad behavior, they fail. Now we know why 58%, our teams function at a 58, or 58% of their potential. Team leaders rarely, if ever, hear the truth from their people. 82% of team members feel misunderstood or undervalued. Right? We saw what that looks like. We saw the nurture voice, quieter voice. People forget about taking care of the needs of others. We see the creative voice. People forget to think about how this impacts the future. We see the guardian voice. 30% of the population speaks guardian. 30 plus 43 plus 9% is 82. The quieter voices are the ones that are misunderstood. And then again, leaders undermine their influence every day without even knowing it. Every day. Why? Because we don't know our tendencies. We don't know our tendencies. So remember, love God, love people as you love yourself. It's a three-part process. It's a three-part process. I believe that you can learn who you are in the Lord by discovering your leadership voice. And in fact, I have a personal experience with that. When I first heard about the voices, I thought for sure I was a pioneer. I've done a lot of pioneering things. Then I took the test, the assessment, and the answers that I gave the assessment indicated that I was an extrovert. But I'm not. I'm an introvert. I recharge alone. I'm what we call battery powered. Battery powered. Extroverts are solar powered. Well, an extroverted creative tends to be more outgoing, like around people, right? They recharge around people and outside ideas. Well, that's connector creative. I'm actually a creative connector pioneer. So that discovery is not an instantaneous assessment. In fact, the assessment is going to tell you whatever you tell it. However, the assessment that we offer is going to be correct 80, 70, 80, 90% of the time on your foundational voice. But if you've gone through this video series here, then you should probably be able to determine what your foundational leadership voice is. That's where we start. We look at those nuances. And then you can connect with our team to discover more, to get into a deeper dive. We can discover more about what your natural wiring looks like. Because here's the thing. If we've learned how to speak guardian because our job requires it for the last 20 years, you're going to test like a guardian. But you might be a pioneer. You might be an extroverted people person. You might be a winner. Somebody who's always thinking about winning. And that's what we're going to talk about today, is the pioneer voice. The pioneer voice. So pioneers, listen up. If you think you're a pioneer, you could be, or you could be just because of training like me. But here's the point. What if every voice around the table was truly heard, valued, or appreciated? What we find is that the pioneer voice is the strongest voice because they're very logical, they're very strategic, they're results focused, so they're always trying to solve and win. But that can also be an Achilles heel because sometimes their need to win overrides the opinions and values of others. So what if we heard all the voices before we heard the pioneer voice? Pioneers go last. We've got nurturer, creative, guardian, connector, then pioneer. So we need to hear all the other voices before we hear the pioneers. Here's the thing, pioneers. You've been thinking about a thing for the last 2 weeks, whereas everyone else is just trying to contribute today because this is when it was brought up. Think about it. You sent the email. Hopefully you gave an agenda, right? So everybody comes knowing what we're going to talk about, and hopefully you sent an email or had some additives about who you wanted to contribute what information. But if you did all that and you just start talking in the meeting, no one's going to talk. Why? Because you spent the most time thinking about it. Because, again, you're a problem solver. Well, they're just hearing about it in either your email or the meeting. And perhaps if they didn't read the email, right? I mean, how many emails do we get a day? How do we read them all? We can't. So you got to give the other voices a chance because they haven't thought about it yet. You've been thinking about it for the last 3 weeks. And you're wired to win. You're wired to win. So you've spent your whole life winning. So you're good at it. So when they speak up, they tend to come off as adversarial to you. They tend to come off as adversarial. They're not an adversary. They're a contributor. Here's the thing. There's a book out there that Chris Voss wrote called Never Split the Difference. He's a consultant as well. Was the #1 hostage negotiator for the FBI. I love the whole book. The whole book is great. But this is the thing he says at the end. He says, remember, the person sitting across the table from you is your partner in the solution. They are not the adversary. None of his techniques will work if you think that the person sitting across the table from you is an adversary. Well, if you're wired to win and someone's inhibiting the speed at which you win, they're going to seem like an adversary. So, pioneers, slow it down. Slow it down. You've got to understand that that person's not the adversary. They're your partner in the solution. And in the faith realm, we know that there is an adversary. The adversary is the spirit of fear. We also call Satan or Hasatan. The adversary is what that means. So the adversary is the situation. It is the negative thoughts and behaviors. It is the tendencies and the weapon systems, right? So all of this goes into knowing ourselves to lead ourselves, recognizing those tendencies, those patterns of behavior that have emerged throughout our life, that have caused the consequences, and of course the reality that we live in. And if you don't like the reality, think about how you got there. If you're a certified jail inspector and you don't like that job, well, how did you end up there? Or what was the tendency? What was the tendency? What are your tendencies? When you think about this tool, the Know Yourself to Lead Yourself tool, think about those tendencies. Do you have a tendency to embellish? Do you have a tendency not to talk? Do you have a tendency to say yes to everything? Do you have a tendency to take care of people too much? Do you have a tendency to negatively fantasize about the future? Do you have a tendency to not be open to new ideas? Do you have a tendency to shut others down in the meeting? What are your tendencies? I guarantee you that your tendencies are especially the negative ones, are the easiest way to identify your voice. Me personally, I tested as an extrovert, but one of the introverted weapon systems is called the Hulk. The creative's weapon system is the Hulk. And I'm going to get into that more later, but what I want you to know about it is that that was my weapon system. So I kept asking that question, okay, if I'm a connector, or if I'm a pioneer, why is my weapon system the Hulk? It's because I wasn't. So when I started looking at the negative aspects of my life, over drinking, overeating, excessive behavior, that's a Hulk. Overdoing it, right? What happens when the Hulk gets mad? The more anger, the more tough he gets, etc., the worse it is, right? So it's a spiral out of control, or a train run, out of control train. That's the weapon system of the creative connector pioneer. So know yourself to lead yourself, and your tendencies, your negative tendencies, are the easiest way to spot that voice. We've got the 5 voices. You've heard me talk about these a number of times now. Recapping: nurturer, quietest voice, 43% of the population. Present tense oriented. Creative, future orientated. Organizational integrity is another big creative trait. 9% of the population. future-oriented, the farthest into the future. They basically see what doesn't exist already. And they love doing it. They get a kick out of it. They love being the one that created a thing nobody else thought of. It's their superpower. Guardians, 30% of the population. Efficiency, systems, processes, present tense oriented. Connectors, relational networks. Remember what I said before? I said, what did I say? 150 friends, 150 best friends, and 1,000 friends. They know them all. They know all their names, kids, everything. They remember stuff. Remember, when you see that connector and you haven't seen them in 2 or 3 years, it's like you saw them yesterday and had dinner with their family. That's how excited they are about you. That's how they are excited about you. That's why having them in the front of the organization is great, because they know all the clients and they make all the clients feel wonderful. And they're not disingenuous. That's the thing, is they're not trying to manipulate. They truly care about lots of people, truly care about passion, or truly have that passion about others. So remember, they want your respect, they want your trust. And today we're going to cover the pioneers' tendencies. 7% of the population, rarest voice. Results focused, strategy, problem solving. Not a lot of peopleness going on there. We're going to talk about how that looks. Future oriented, always thinking about future, always thinking about winning in the future. I love to talk about the pioneer, because the pioneer usually has plan A, plan B, is halfway up the mountain, turns around, looks back, and wonder why no one's following. Pioneers, always on the go, always on the job. Love pioneers. Can't win. You're probably not going to win without some pioneering characteristics. So it's good to have. It's good to model that. And if you're not a first voice pioneer or second or third, you can still win, but you're going to have to adopt some of those techniques. That's another thing about the 5 voices, is if you understand what winning looks like, whether it's faith in Jesus, that's winning to us. Whether it's profit and loss statements, that's winning to us. Whether it's all the team members around the table feeling valued, that's winning to us. Pioneers are good at that. I love having pioneers as clients, because once they get it, once they buy it, they're the best students. Best students. Let's see. Remember, your voice is made up of all 5 voices. Some voices are more natural than others. Maturity allows you to appreciate all the 5 voices. What does that look like? So that means that the more mature leader you are, the better you speak the other voices, or at least understand them. So we like to say that you have a voice order. Mine's creative, connector, pioneer, nurture, guardian. But as you mature, that voice order can get squished. So maturity allows you to appreciate it and also speak that language. Think about Jesus, right? How well did he speak to Andrew? How well did he speak to John? Right? How well did he speak to Philip? It's my guardian for him. And we're going to talk about who my scripture references are for the pioneer later. But remember, maturity allows us to value all of the people's contribution. Nature, nurture, and choice all play a part in your leadership behaviors. Your leadership behaviors are probably how you're going to answer the test. Right? When you take our assessment, it's free. There's a paid version too. And in fact, I'm happy to personally walk you through that paid version if you want to. And don't assume you know what each word means. Remember, we define what a nurturer is. We've defined the creative. We defined the guardian. We defined the connector. Today, we're going to define the pioneer. And remember, you're not allowed to tell somebody what their voice is. I'm not allowed to tell somebody what their voice is. I can recognize tendencies of the voices. I can help someone through the assessment, but you pick your voice. If you've had a Myers-Briggs assessment, Enneagram, DISC, Badger, box turtle, whatever, right? Peacock, I think it was a peacock once, and an owl. I don't know what that means, right? Nobody wants to be put in a box. The 5 leadership voices is about discovering your leadership voice. That's why I'm doing this series, because I want you to know that you can discover your leadership voice, but you speak all 5. It's not a box to live in. It's a coat to try on. Try on the coat, see if it fits. If it doesn't fit, let's try on a different one. I did, and it'll work for you too. Pioneer. Champion of strategic vision. Think chessboard. Results. thinking about getting the job done, and problem solving. Pioneers love to solve problems. The bigger the problem, the better. They live for it. They live for it. Sometimes that desire can override the opinions and thoughts of others as well. So let's see how pioneers act. Pioneers approach life with an anything is possible attitude. Anything is possible. Why? Because creating something and winning is a problem to be solved. Visioning and shaping a scalable future is always highest priority. All right, so how do we look at pioneers? Pioneers will help you with the idea. But if your idea is something that'll work for the community, they're going to figure out how to make it work for the state, for the nation. Next thing you know, that pioneer in their vision, they've colonized Mars and they've taken it to other solar systems as well. That is not an exaggeration. The pioneer will get you there. Strategic military thinking makes them incredibly effective at aligning people, systems, and processes. Incredibly effective at aligning people, systems, and processes. Winning is a massive driver. They hate to give up and will drive their team long after others would have. Long after everybody else has quit, the pioneer's hard at work. This is the reason why pioneers tend to override the meetings. Because remember, long after everybody went home, they were there till 8 p.m. still thinking and working on the problem. So the next morning when we come in for the team meeting, they're probably not exhausted because they're energized by what they figured out. They jump right in and they wonder why everyone's not caught up. It's because nobody thought about it as long as they did. They can be powerful communicators using logic and rationality to provide an attractive and scalable vision for the future. Scalable vision for the future. Strategy, big picture thinking. Now, the immature pioneer can often appear very arrogant with a me-focused attitude. Why me-focused? Well, because they've been thinking about the problem a lot longer than everyone else. So they know that their idea is right. But while they were there till 8 p.m., no one else was there contributing. So pioneers, bring your thoughts to the table, but gather the other thoughts first. Let the other voices go first. Start the meeting with the other voices. Bring it together for them in your chessboard strategic way. And then think about the solution. Now the next morning, you can deliver that solution to your superior or to your boss or your client or whomever in a strategic way that includes all the details that the guardians and the nurturers bring, all the vision of the future that the creators bring, and of course, how we're going to get the resources. That's what the connectors will tell you. You're going to think you know, but they know. They are closest to that part of the problem. Now, again, the immature pioneer, or we say accidental pioneer, might quickly dismiss the contributions of those they don't believe to be competent. What does that look like? Well, here's the thing. When the pioneer's on the path to winning, if you're not part of the path to winning, they really don't have time. Right? They're focused on winning, and they can't help it. Pioneers get a bad rap in the world. My dad's a pioneer, so I understand. It's probably why I show up like a pioneer a lot of the times. They get a bad rap, but that's how they're wired. So my goal in the 5 leadership voices is to get the nurturers, the creatives, and even the guardians to speak up a little bit more, and get the connectors and the pioneers to talk a little bit less, perhaps to engage everyone and be those leaders that they are. Newsflash, 55% of leadership positions are held by connectors and pioneers. 18% of the population holds 55% of the thing. Why? Because they are speaking up first. So, nurturers, we need to hear you. Creatives, we need to hear you. Guardians, we need to hear you. Don't shut down. Connectors, we need to hear them. Pioneers, we need to hear them. See where this is going? 82% of team members feel misunderstood or undervalued. Why? Because 18% is doing the most talking. Pioneers, we all love working with you. We love working for you. Create an environment where everyone can bring their best. And remember, we talked about the percentages a number of times here, but here's them all laid out. 43%, 9%, 30%, 11%, and then the pioneer is 7%. A lot of people think they're pioneers. A lot of people think they're pioneers, especially in America. Very pioneering spirit. It's what it took to found the country. Here's the summary of the pioneer. Champion of strategic vision, results focused, and problem solving. Got to watch out. Watch out, though. Pioneers lack sensitivity. Remember, it's not their fault. They're wired that way. They're wired that way. We need pioneers. We need pioneers. They can be unwilling to listen and perceived as arrogant. It's just a perception. They're not arrogant. They really do want to solve the problem. They are passionate about solving problems, not necessarily passionate about people. Right? We call them thinkers. They're very future-oriented thinkers. So they're about solving problems and winning a future-oriented thing. Now, you don't need to worry about trying to empower a pioneer. You don't need to empower them. Give them the resources to win, encourage them to win, and make sure you teach them to listen to the other voices. That's how you can empower a pioneer. That's how you empower the pioneer. So pioneers, or if you're leading a pioneer, here's some things to keep in mind. You got to avoid the intellectual superiority complex. You don't always have all the best ideas. Sometimes you're actually wrong. Newsflash, right? Take time to truly hear the values and opinions of others on the team. Make that intentional because you'll set the example for the others. Beware the power of your voice. In a moment of frustration, you can do a lot of damage to others. We call the Pioneer's weapon system the grenade launcher. Grenade launcher. Remember, nurturers view the world differently than you. Remember, winning is not the driving motivation for most people. Not everyone is driven in that regard, but winning is something that everyone can do, especially if the pioneer is an effective leader. Your team knows you're competent, but they're not convinced you know anything about them outside of work. What about their family? What about their dog? What about their kids? What about their hobbies, their interests? Right? When you build that relationship, you really win through others. And you're not going to grow your company, you're not going to grow your team, you're not going to increase performance if you can't win through others. Team up with a nurturer and ask them to show you their opinion. Look at the world through the nurturer's eyes. Nurturers are at the opposite end of the spectrum, as we'll see. Remember, take time each day. Here's what's interesting. Take time each day to encourage someone who doesn't deserve it. What in the world? Why would I encourage somebody who doesn't deserve it? Remember, the winning is not the driving motivation for every person. So in your eyes, pioneer, they might not deserve it. But here's the thing. They just don't exhibit that same quality that you do. They exhibit other qualities that are equally important. So the mature, the intentional pioneer will compliment somebody who maybe perhaps in their mind doesn't deserve it, but really does. Because you have no idea what kind of impact is happening behind the scenes that you're not aware of because you're so driven to win. That's cool. We like it. I want you to win. But I want you to win through others. Be a leader worth following. This is how you do it. Sometimes you're wrong. Pioneers, sometimes you're wrong. Fight your initial instinct to justify your decision and deflect blame. You will earn massive influence and respect if you own your mistakes. Massive influence. Why? You're already a massive communicator. You're already powerful. Own your mistakes. Recognize that you might be wrong, and your influence will grow manifold strength. It will amplify, magnify, and grow your team too. Because why? Because they trust you. They trust you. People that don't own their mistakes aren't trustworthy in the eyes of most people. Why? Well, because they're never going to learn. They're not going to be coachable. You have to learn to change. Have to learn to change. We all do. We all do. Let's take a look at the 5 voices dynamics here. You can see the pioneers at the bottom right. What does that mean? That means future-oriented and very logical. Future and logic. Now look at the top left there. We've got nurturer, people and values, present tense oriented. This is why your nemesis voice is the nurturer, and we say team up with the nurturer. Team up with the nurturer and see the world through their eyes. It'll work. Some of my best clients have teamed up with the nurturer on their executive team, and see the world through their eyes. Nurturers know everything about everybody because people trust the nurturer. Nurturers know things about people. Nurturers know things. Pioneers, you need to know stuff if you're going to be the best leader, if you're going to be a leader worth following. And when we think about the pioneer, we're in the bottom right-hand part of this graph here. We're seeing results. We're seeing strategy, innovation, vision, right? Big picture thinking. Remember, we want to colonize Mars. We want to put some of our own planets around Jupiter. Pioneer is going to help you get there. Now my favorite part. Pioneers in the Bible. Pioneers in the Bible. Got to start with the Old Testament. My favorite Old Testament pioneer is Deborah. Deborah. You might not know it, but Deborah was noted as a prophetess. If I said that right, prophetess. Prophet was a leadership position, but Deborah was very strategic, very military, and I loved how direct she was. She spoke for God as a prophetess, of course, but also indicated leadership, mastery, and strategic military minded. She gave a specific troop count that was needed to win. Remember, win. And she was very direct. She literally told him that he wouldn't get credit because she was a woman. And I like that nuance there because not many women would point that out. It was kind of known, but that's just how direct she was. I see a pioneer in Deborah when I read the scriptures. Love to know what you think, though. In fact, in all of our 5 Leadership Voices series, I'd love for you to put your comments in the comment section about who you think the voices represent in the scriptures. My goal here, obviously, implicitly, is to get you to read the Bible more, but this can be a fun exercise, too, because you might see things that I don't. All right. Now, this one's probably obvious now that I've explained the pioneer voice, but my New Testament male is Paul. Paul used to be Saul. When Saul was the number 1 Jew, he was the Jew of all Jews, and he was a Roman citizen. That's a huge thing, right? He was killing Christians. Killing Christians. Why? Because he was trying to win. He thought they were this weird cult and that they were going to cause problems in the coming of the actual Messiah, who they were all looking for, right? But then Jesus stopped him in his tracks and said, hey, I need you to listen up here. Put him in timeout. You like to say Paul was in timeout. Saul was in timeout. Then he became Paul. And again, with that same military mind, he literally brought the New Testament to all the Gentiles in that area, in the known world at the time. But remember how many times he was beaten, stabbed, imprisoned. He kept going. He did not care what anybody think. I love it because Paul always kept taking territory back from the enemy. In our faith, the enemy has taken the world. He got it from Adam when Adam sinned, and we've just been taking back territory. Well, Paul did an amazing job of that in the Gentile community, which was largely pagan. Largely pagan. A lot of human sacrifices. God got rid of all that through Paul. And he did not concern himself with the opinions of others. In fact, he and Peter had to go at it. Now, a lot of people think Peter was a connector. I think Peter was also a pioneer, and I like to bring that up because Peter was impulsive like a connector, but he had a problem bringing challenge to the Jewish community. All right? So I believe that Paul, in his pioneeringness, set him straight. Set him straight. And it took a strong pioneer to set another pioneer straight. That's my opinion, though. Love for you to put your opinions in the comments. That is the 5 leadership voices. Deborah, Paul, formerly Saul. Those are my pioneer voices from the Bible. It has been an absolute pleasure to bring the 5 leadership voices to you. We're going to start next time with some new content, with some new guests, but all around using pictures and videos to create leaders worth following. Remember, Intrepid Impact Leadership Channel sits at the intersection of faith, leadership, and business. To us, those are as inseparable as Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. Remember, our mission The reason why we exist here on the channel and in the world is to restore trust in leadership. And hopefully this series has done that for you. I'm Jerry Howard, your host. Thanks for tuning in. We'll see you next time.
82% of team members feel misunderstood or undervalued. So this is exactly where I like to be. Teaching, communicating, helping others, realizing their aspirations. I'm so excited about shattering the glittering image and uncovering the truth about you.